Cheers, queers! We are back with another super fun interview today. Today, we are talking to the fabulous Holly Stars about her debut mystery novel, Murder in the Dressing Room. Welcome to the podcast, Holly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Well, we're super excited to talk to you. This is our first, we've talked about many books, interviewed many authors, our first murder mystery book. So we're so excited about this.
When we got the email, I think I messaged Theora immediately and was like, hey, Theora, yes.
Yes,
finally.
Mystery. Okay, so for the listeners at home that don't know, Murder in the Dressing Room, that is why we're here. So could you let the listeners at home know who may not have read the book, tell them about the novel?
Yes. So Murder in the Dressing Room is a drag-focused murder mystery set in the Soho district of London. And our main character, Misty Devine, finds her drag mother poisoned backstage in her dressing room with a poisoned chocolate. And she doesn't think that the police are looking in the right places. And because she's watched a lot of Criminal Minds, she believes that she can solve the case. And so she sets about to catch the killer. And that's in a nutshell.
So if you haven't read it, what are you waiting for?
Right.
Really.
Exactly. Read it now.
What inspired you to write this novel?
Well, I've been trying to write crime fiction for a long time, for, 20 years or something. I've been writing books and sending them and trying to get them published, and I was having no joy. And I gave up and I channeled my writing enthusiasm into writing stand-up comedy and started performing instead. And that led to somebody asking me to write a play called Death Drop, which was a drag murder mystery that ran on the West End and then did a tour of the UK and Ireland. And after that, I thought, well, I'll try again. And so I contacted a literary agent and said, my show's closing in a couple of weeks. Do you want to come and see it? And she said yes. She came to see it and she enjoyed it. So I sent her the last book that I had written, and she was like, this isn't quite right for me, but if you write anything else, let me know. So I went away and thought about it, and I thought a drag murder mystery, since I'd written for stage a murder mystery where the characters weren't drag, but they were portrayed by drag artists. I thought actually a murder mystery set in the world of drag could be really fun. So I just, sat down one day and wrote out the title and the first few chapters and sent it over to her, and she loved it and she signed me up, and then I finished the book, we edited it, and that was the start of the process. But yeah, it was a strange sort of, I gave up the writing of books to start writing comedy, and then the writing of the comedy led to writing the book. So it was a strange circle.
It's like when you stop looking for something, that's when it comes to you.
Right.
Exactly. It's weird, isn't it, how that happens? So yeah, I got there in the end, not how I expected.
And now we have Murder in the Dressing Room.
Which is great. Dressing room, yeah.
Okay. So when sitting down to write Murder in the Dressing Room, did any of your life experiences influence how you wrote the novel, or any ideas that came about in the novel themselves?
I suppose so. Well, obviously there's the drag element of it. It's a world that I know and am involved with now for a few years. And so some of the language certainly that's used amongst the drag performers and some of the interactions are, I hope, a little bit reflective of the types of interactions that I've had with drag performers throughout my career. And then I guess my desire to see more rounded representation of drag artists in media was important to me. And a lot of times, I think, and particularly in crime fiction, there are other writers writing drag murder mysteries. It's not the first one. There's the amazing Kitty Murphy who writes the Dublin drag mysteries. So it's not the first one. So I'm not, breaking ground with this. But what I wanted to do was show that drag artists are more than the sequin and sparkle that you see for 15 minutes during a cabaret set, but outside of that, that they have full lives with relationships and friendships, and there is a sense of community between them that's deeper than perhaps what you would realize if you've only experienced drag from going to see a show or from watching it on the television. And so that really was one of my main goals, was to show that these drag characters have real lives. Too often, I think, in crime fiction, especially on television crime fiction, the drag artists are the doorkeepers or the victims or the best friends, and we don't get to see much of who they are outside of their sparkle. And so what I wanted was to portray sort of a real life where their artistry and their queerness is not the central focus of the story. And so, the murder is not related to the identities or the sexualities or the genders of the characters. The investigation is not impacted by that at all. Joe, or Misty, out of drag, Misty is called Joe, and Joe is non-binary. Joe's non-binariness is not a central part of the story. It's just who they are throughout the story. And that was really important to me.
I love that so much. Like, I love that you're talking about the representation of the drag community, because that's why our podcast is here. It's to advocate for better representation in the media, because so much work still needs to be done. We've come a long way, but there's still, especially within the overall community, different areas that definitely need more representation. So thank you for adding to that. What would you like to see for like representation in the future?
I'd like to see all the various types of drag fully represented to the same level. At the moment, we know that the cis male drag queens are the ones who are often platformed the most frequently and the most prominently, and that our amazing drag kings are left behind by the mainstream media representation of drag. And so I think it's especially important to be ensuring that the kings and the king community are included in more of our programming going forward. I would love that. I would love to see a drag race style show just for the kings, that on mainstream television, that's getting millions of views, that gets them all tons of followers, so that we can be equally platformed. At the moment, it feels like one part of the community is being lifted above the rest.
I mean, we have 50,000 baking type shows. We can have more than
yes. Yes.
Like, they come up with a new one every day. Like, yes. How did you even think they change one little? Yeah, anyway, that's a whole different topic.
There's room for everybody. There is room for everybody. So yeah, I guess that's what I'd like to see, is just, when you come to I don't know if it's the same in the States, but if you come to a cabaret in London, even then the representation is not always balanced, but oftentimes you will see a lineup that has kings, queens, performers that don't identify as either or as something else, and I think that's amazing. That's the best type of drag show for me. They're the most creative, they're the most exciting, and they're the most inclusive. And if that could be replicated somehow for international television platforms, I think that would be lovely. Don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, I would watch definitely. That. We want it all.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But we're getting some in your novel. So in the novel, our main character, Misty, describes drag as a form of freedom. Why did you choose to describe drag in such a powerful way?
Because, well, there's two answers to that. The first is that for Misty and Joe, as one singular human. Jo is very anxious, very nervous throughout the book, finds the investigating part, talking to people, very difficult, and then suddenly puts on the costume, puts on the wig, puts on the glamour, and feels like they can do anything. And so for Jo, Misty makes them feel like freedom. That was the main thing. And then there is a freedom to drag. There's a freedom to drag. You can do and be whoever you want, and you can get up on that stage. You get booked, you know, at a cabaret club. You get up on that stage. You've got 15 minutes. You do whatever you want, whatever song you want, whatever costume you want. You dress however you want, and for 15 minutes, that's yours, and it's nobody else's. And that's, I think, the freedom of drag. And I don't think that there should be any prescribed way of doing drag, and no one should be telling you that's right and that's wrong when you're doing this. Like, you know, it's a personal creative choice. I think that's important.
Yeah, that's a good way of framing it. It's empowering and a creative outlet, like you said, in many different ways. And to go back to what you're talking about representation and the various forms of drag and the people in drag, I thought you did a really good job of diversifying your cast, you know, the cast in the book. And so when it came to creating those performers, like the people in the cabaret and Misty's workplace, how did you go about like creating those characters? Because you gave a lot of depth to them. Like, how did you like approach each and every one when you were like,
yeah, I wanted them to feel real, and I wanted to showcase all those, well, as many as I could within the number of characters that I had. I wanted to showcase the variety of drag that we see in the UK drag scene, and that is kings, queens, non-binary performers, stand-up comedians, dancers, lip syncers. Misty's a singer. You know, everyone has their own skill. Some people amazingly can do everything, and then they go on Drag Race, which is amazing, and they do all the millions of challenges that they're expected to do on there. So I just wanted to show, you know, there's so much talent in the world of drag, and so I really thought carefully about what each of those characters could do. What was their skill? What was their performance like? And then who were they? What was their personality like? Because just like everybody else, everybody's different. Some people are tricky, some people are chatty, some people are easy to get along with, some people are nightmares. So it was just, yeah, to really show that there's a breadth to drag that that people don't always see.
I mean, it's great. I love this book so much. Like the representation, that's why we're here. And it means so much. And I hope that everyone reading it, whether they are part of the drag community or not, they feel closer to it.
I hope so. And I hope that what people get out of it is that idea. You know, I've tried not to look at the reviews because I'm like, it's already been printed. There's nothing I can do. These reviews not helpful to me at this stage. I can't make any changes. But I have seen a few, and I've seen a couple where they've marked me down a point or something for the book not being camp enough. And that's exactly what I was trying. They've missed the point entirely if they're thinking that, because that is what I was trying to challenge. We are not just camp spectacles for your entertainment, but we are real people who are going through a real creative and personal process to deliver that work to you. And that's what I hope people get out of reading it is that.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't campy at all. It felt very real, like you were saying, like all that's what blew me away. Like the characters felt very real. There's a lot of depth to all of them. And it felt like a real scenario. Like, unfortunately there was a murder, but and thievery happening, but like the people, the setting, like there was a realness to it that isn't often there. Like, and to have campiness is okay, but like not everything needs to be campy, like you're saying. So it was refreshing, you know?
Well, like I made it as camp as I could, I think, while keeping it a real crime novel. You know, I didn't want to write a drag book. I wanted to write a crime novel set in the world of drag. And that I think is, you know, that's they're two distinct things. It's not the same.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really what I was aiming for. And I
mean,
hope
like,
they do feel a little bit real, but I did, it is camp. A drag queen poisoned backstage with a box of chocolates wrapped in silk. Like, I mean, what else could I have done to
There's a
There's
Judy
nothing.
Garland
Nothing
dress
shooting.
too. Like, come on.
there's a cat burglar and Judy Garland is involved. I mean, it's just couldn't be any camper, I don't think.
This is when people need to write their own books.
That.
Okay, so to quote the novel, the police were already controversial in the drag community. How did you approach writing a murder mystery centered in a marginalized community?
Well, I think that obviously there are historical problems with the policing of queer people, in everywhere in the world, in the UK especially. As recently as the 90s, the Royal Vauxhall Tavern was being raided by police wearing rubber gloves, afraid to touch people. I mean, ridiculous things within our, living memory. So, so I was aware that there is a history of queer people and lots of other people not trusting the police, and so that was, I think, part of what I wanted to touch on, but to touch on quite lightly. So the character of D.I. Davies, who is the police officer assigned to investigate the murder, he isn't ever outright homophobic or queerphobic, or he isn't that. I think what he is a representation of the ignorance that exists within our sort of layers of government and law enforcement, and he just simply doesn't understand it. He's just got no experience of it, and he does not understand what he's dealing with when he comes into this drag club. He doesn't know how to call them, how to gender them. He doesn't know anything at all about the world that they exist in. It is entirely new to him. And I think that is something that can be said of many people. It is a world that not a lot of people know. But when you see it happening in real life, or when you read about it in the book, it feels shocking that he wouldn't know how to behave better or more sensitively in this environment. And so that was my intention with him, was not to create a character that was critical of the police and calling them a homophobic institution, because I think they've done lots of work since to improve the way that they communicate with the LGBTQ plus community, but that's ignorance in society does still obviously exist. His sergeant, who is working alongside him, Detective Sergeant Hughes, is much better, and throughout the book we can see that she has a better understanding of the queer community, and she's a bit more of a character that we can depend on, and that was really the point, was to balance it. So not everyone in the police is going to be a rotter, and not everyone in the police is going to be a good one. But we've got two police in this book, and we've got one of each. So that was how I tried to show a little bit, yeah, there's been a problem here, and there is a wider problem, but not everybody is involved in that problem.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It was striking to me to kind of see that, because it makes things complicated, and there's specific dialogue or thoughts from Joe and Misty, like at different points, being like, I feel like they're dismissing us, and they're not focused on like the murder part. They're focused on something else, which is more like heteronormative, like, the other thievery that's happening in the book. No, not to spoil anything, but I just found that really interesting, because I almost, like, to me, I was like, that would, as somebody who's invested in that community, I would be inspired to true crime this myself. So like it made sense for the plot too, to be like, well, I'll do it if they're not going to do it, kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. You mentioned at the beginning that this book takes place in Soho. which is a neighborhood in London's West End. As Americans, and Americans that particularly listen to us. Can you explain why you chose this location or why it might be significant to this particular novel?
Yeah, Soho historically is one of the queer hubs within the UK, and Old Compton Street, where the majority of the book is set, where Misty's club is located. Old Compton Street is a street full of queer venues, and so I wanted to write something that felt real, that we could believe that if someone from our community picked it up and had a read of it, that they would understand it as a real place. And also it's where I work mostly. So when I first started performing, I had a monthly cabaret that I used to run before COVID, and I ran that in Soho, and I regularly perform at a comedy club in Soho, and so yeah, it's a place that I know and I felt that I could write about, but also that has a really strong sort of connection already to the community.
So what you're saying is if we ever go to London, we should go to Soho.
You should go to Soho. There's loads of cool places in London, but Soho's pretty cool. I like it.
So Theora, we have to add that to our travel list.
Yes, we do.
We'll do a pit stop in London on our way to Thailand.
There you go.
Yes. Do it. I'll give you all the good places.
Yeah. Well, do you have any recommendations for even our audience? Like, what's the first place that they should go?
Oh, I love, and it's where I hosted my cabaret for a long time, and I have a show there tomorrow, a new show. I love a place called the Phoenix Arts Club, which is a cabaret club underneath the Phoenix Theatre, and it is, very sort of lovely cabaret club vibes, the round black tables and lovely stage, and every night of the week they have different shows on different cabarets with burlesque and drag and comedy and musical theatre, and they have a fabulous Thursday night karaoke hosted by the drag king Adam All and Apple Derrieres and the Queen, and they are amazing. So yeah, Phoenix Arts Club is a good place, is a good bet for, there's something on every day.
That's awesome. Right. Okay, so back to the novel. Yes. As Joe attempts to solve the crime, they find themselves increasingly suspicious of all their close friends and colleagues from Ladies Bar. What was that journey like for Joe to have mixed feelings about people they view as family?
Oh, it was interesting to write, and actually kind of moving to write how these characters interact with each other. And in fact, I'm just at the very end of writing the second Misty Divine mystery, and that one is even more of an emotional roller coaster than the first. But I sorry, I'm knocking furniture, but I enjoyed I enjoyed the mystery, and I wrote it the first half of the book without knowing who the killer was. And so I wrote down who all of my characters were. And then I just went, right, I'm just going to write it. And then at some point I'll have to decide who is the murderer. And that was a really fun way for me to approach it. I really enjoyed and I've done the same with the second book. I set up the mystery at the beginning, and then I was like, okay, when I get to halfway through, then I'll do the plotting of the rest and then go back and fix what needs fixing in the first half. So it was quite nice to write all those characters without thinking you are the murderer, without having that in mind. It was quite nice to write those opening scenes without knowing.
Well, because you make them an actual person first and then have the motive, because then if you know who it is in the beginning, it's going to influence the way you write everything. So I think that was a great tactic, actually.
Yeah, It definitely worked for me. It was a nice way to do it, because then I felt that the conversations in the dressing rooms at the beginning and during the opening show in the first chapter felt really natural, because I wasn't trying to disguise the fact that someone was a murderer. You know, I knew as much as Misty did who had done it, and that was a nice way to write it and present it, I thought.
Yeah, definitely more fun for you, because then you're like, I wonder what's going to happen as you're writing.
Yeah. And then halfway through, I realized who the murderer was. I was like, oh my God, no.
I love that. That's so perfect. That's so perfect, because after, learning more about you, you just in general seem to be quite the murder mystery enthusiast in general. Like you mentioned, you had your play, so Drop Death, and then you produce and co-host a murder mystery review podcast, Read to Death. Great title.
I did. We're not doing it anymore, but we did. Yeah, last year we had me and a drag queen called Keisha's Lorraine, and she's fabulous, based near Bristol. And we had a podcast for a while where we were reading and reviewing murder mysteries, and that was so fun. Just chatting a lot of nonsense about about the books that we'd read.
Yes, it does sound like a lot of fun. I'm just wondering, what got you interested in the murder mystery genre, and what keeps you interested?
Oh, well, I suppose I've always enjoyed, in England, we did have, I think it ran for about 30 years, a television program called The Bill, where every week there were 2 episodes that had a sort of crime. It was light entertainment sort of stuff. And I remember watching that as a kid. But I really got into crime fiction when I was about 13, and I went on holiday to Wales, and it was so boring. It was the worst holiday, the worst holiday. We were staying on some farm. I hated it. And there was a book in the farmhouse. We weren't staying in the farmhouse. We weren't rich enough for that. We were camping in the farmer's field. But in the house of the farmer, she had a book by Jonathan Kellerman, one of the Alex Delaware novels. And in that book, he's a child psychologist, and the secondary detective is called Milo, and he was a gay LAPD detective. And at the age of 13, that was the first time I'd ever read a book or seen a crime thing of any kind that had a queer character. And I read all of them for like 10 years. Every time a new one came out, I read it. And so I'd been interested in it since then, and especially interested in the development of the secondary detective. So I love Watson in Sherlock Holmes on the television and in the books. I'm always fascinated by how those relationships work. And so for me, with Misty in Murder in the Dressing Room, that character was Miles, her boyfriend. And that was a really interesting dynamic to write, because he's very supportive of her investigation until it gets a bit risky. So it was fun to write that relationship. And so I think that's what keeps me interested, is all that kind of thing. And then writing Death Drop was really fun. It was kind of a loose pastiche on Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. So it was, the traditional murder mystery setup, with each character arrives in the fancy house one at a time, and we learn about them, and then terrible storm and they're all cut off from the mainland, and then someone dies. I love it. It's just, I think it's camp.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. Okay, but we skipped over something.
Oh.
And we need to go back.
Oh.
To something you said.
Oh, what did I say?
Second book.
Second, yeah. There's going to be at least 3. So
at least love it.
I was gonna ask, because the end is a little like, will we see Misty again? So happy to hear that.
Well, yeah. I think I'm allowed to say it was announced when the book deal was announced, so I reckon I'm allowed to talk about that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there are 3 signed for 3 Misty
great.
Divine
Nice.
Mysteries. So yeah, so it's not the first one. Second one is, well, past its deadline, but it's nearly finished. I'm a busy lady.
Yeah.
Of course. Also, creativity takes time. It'll be
Yes,
amazing when they get it.
exactly. So yeah, there will be a second one, and a third one. And
Well,
what's
I hope
nice
you
is,
come back to talk about those too.
oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. But what's nice is that when we pitched them to the publishers, I had to give an outline of 2 and 3 so that they could see Misty's journey across the 3 books. So it's kind of what each mystery was going to be. So I kind of already know the outline of what happens, and now I'm filling in the gaps.
Perfect.
Awesome.
That's so fun.
That's awesome to hear too. Love the universe.
Yeah, well,
well,
that's why I asked for on the cover, and I didn't think they would let me do it, and they weren't sure if they were going to do it. But I asked for a Misty Divine Mystery to be on the cover, so that the whole series is called The Misty Divine Mysteries. And that cover that you're holding up right there, they asked me they asked me to send in comparison covers of books that I thought I would like my cover to look like, or like ideas and inspiration and all of that. And I only sent them one thing. And I thought they're going to hate me for this and they're going to tell me to go away. But I sent them a Sweet Valley High cover and said, I
love
want
it.
the pastels. I want a
Yeah.
lovely 80s style illustration of Misty on the front. I want it to say the name of the series and maybe a little flag on the spine with the number of the book. You know, that's what I what I wanted, and I didn't really think I'd get it. But they've done a sort of, you know, I can see the inspiration in what we got in the end. So I was happy with that.
oh, that's awesome. Do you have any additional queer murder mystery book recommendations for us and our audience to check out?
I'd say go and check out Ketty Murphy, the Drag Dublin Mysteries, for sure. There is a great mystery book. It's not a murder mystery, but it's a sort of light mystery called The Vanishing of Margaret Small by Neil Alexander. And that is a beautiful book that I would totally recommend. And then I have 2 books on my list that I've been like gasping to read, but I can't read anything until I've finished writing my own. But the Betrayal of Thomas True by AJ West is set in sort of historical London in the Molly houses, the old, you know, that's what they called the sort of gay meeting places in the 1800s, and that has had rave reviews, and so that is top of my list for when I finished my book. That's what I'm reading next, is AJ West.
Ooh, all right. That sounds good. I love it. Love historical fiction.
Yeah. I will have to check them out, Theora. We got a long list of books to read now.
So long.
But speaking, like, we've talked a lot about representation, and I'm just curious, was there a show, movie, book that you read growing up that made you feel seen?
I suppose the closest thing to that for me would be Queer as Folk by Russell T Davies. The British series came out, I guess it must have been 1999, because I was, you know, not even born. But Queer as Folk, when it came out, depicted a little bit the lives of queer teenagers in the north of England in the 90s. And I found it to be I could understand the world of that. And that was the first time that I remember seeing something on television about queer people and thinking, oh yeah, I get this. I understand this.
That's beautiful.
No, that's
I
great.
love it.
All right. Well, that concludes all the questions we have for you. Thank you again, Holly, for coming to talk to us. We really appreciate it. We love learning about your process for the novel and just getting to know you a little bit better. This was really great. We appreciate it.
Oh, it's been so fun. I'm so pleased to be here.
Yeah.
And I love that your mission about if you can make it your mission to ensure that they make another series of Agatha all along.
We're trying.
Oh yes. No, it's literally in our schedule. Like we're working on
it. Good.
Yes.
Like,
oh my
finally,
god.
some queers in the Marvel universe, and
seriously, and Patty LaPone in the Marvel universe. Yes,
it's great. We have so much on that.
But until we sign off and try to go save Agatha, how can our listeners at home connect with you, maybe on the internet, or support you?
Well, they absolutely must connect with me on the internet. It would be a terrible mistake not to. And they can find me on TikTok and Blue Sky and Instagram, all at Holly W. Stars. And if they come into London, I've got a website that I don't update as often as I should, but that I sometimes put my upcoming shows on, which is hollywstars.com. And they can find also the links to pre-order the book from whatever country you're in.
Perfect. So everybody at home, get on that.
Get on it. Pre-order it. Quick shop.
Yes. Get your copy of Murder in the Dressing Room, because there's going to be more. So you got to find out what's going on. Please support Holly.
And if you're watching this and it's already out, just go read it now.
Go read it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if this is out before it comes out on January the 14th in the United States and Canada, and everywhere else, it's coming out on the 6th of February.
Perfect. All right. You've been warned.
You've been told.
You've been told. So to everybody at home, that concludes our interview today. Until next time, hydrate for lesbian Jesus.
And gay it up all over the place.
Bye.
Bye.
And with that, we've been Big Gay Energy. If you like this episode, check out all our other episodes right here on YouTube.
Please leave a comment below, and subscribe for more amazing super gay content.